what we all know as people in the academy actually constitutes our lives. So it gives me a lot of pleasure to present Simone Peters, who's going to be our first speaker, and she has a co-authored paper with Rafiloe Makama, and they'll be talking about precariousness, panicking while PhDing in a pandemic and beyond. Simone is presently also in the anthropology department at UCT, and we love her very much despite the panic we've produced. we may have induced. So what we'll be doing is 20 minutes, a maximum per paper, and each presenter will have 20 minutes, and then we'll have half an hour for conversation and discussion in the end. Thank you.
All righty. Okay, I don't know what the time is, but I will talk. It's going for 1:30. Okay. So thank you for having me, and thank you for coming to talk. Unfortunately, Dr. Makama couldn't be with us today because of politics at the university and precariousness with funding and etc., but she did want to be here. And so it is up to me now to present this paper, which we submitted to PINS about 2 years ago, and our paper has yet to be published.
Oh, wow.
So we are also in a battle with the editor to get this work published, but we are hoping that it will get there soon. So this paper has been it's been a long journey of documenting our PhD journeys, our frustrations as black women within academy, our frustrations with always getting contract work and never getting permanent work, our sort of frustrations with the precariousness of the academy, of where to from here, do we have a job, and at the same time balancing our positionalities as, okay, at the time of writing, Rafiloe was a single mother to a 3-year-old. I did not have a child at the time. I do now. Didn't write that into the paper, and the precariousness starts all over again for me. So that is what I will be sharing with you today, our journeys of finishing a PhD in a pandemic. So we offer this as an addition to an already sort of archive of well-documented stories of black women within the academy. It is not, we know that it's not something new. Black women have spoken about their experiences of the academy as an alienating space, as a space of looking for belonging. Do I fit? Do I belong? You know, and Rafiloe and I had spoken, and we said that we need to document this phase in our lives, because we were not. Lots of PhD students were not talking about the experiences of PhDing. It's almost like kept silent. It's almost told to you, go and do this after your master's, get the PhD, it's going to be life-changing, everything is going to change for you. And Rafiloe and I was sitting there, we were like, and we were looking at each other, and I was like, friend, what have we done? Like, where is the joy? Like, we felt drained, we just felt, like, it just felt like a depressing year, like, she was fighting with supervisors. It just, we were fighting for funding. I was like, friend, all we're doing is fighting. Where is the joy in doing this PhD? And then the pandemic hit. And now it's like, what the? Then everything just went haywire. Now we're in our final year. We have pressure from our funders. You need to produce, because we all know the academy is very market driven. It's like, where's your production? Where's your output for your, what are these progress reports? They were asking us, are you producing publications? Where is this? Where's that? Where's this? Where's the compassion? Because at the end of the day, Rafiloe was a mother. She's a single mother. She's got a child to take care of. There's a pandemic she's challenging with, because we all knew what happened. Children couldn't go to school. There was a national lockdown, shutdown happened. Rafiloe and I had to look after a child, and she had to go and move back to her family, where she had 7 people in her household. So now there was this challenge of the home and the work. She's finishing a dissertation. Her supervisor's on her case. Where? But she's like, I'm not coping. But nobody seemed to care that she was not coping. With me at the time, I was living alone. The lockdown, I'm very family orientated. my family is my everything. They support me, they encourage me in times of trouble. And writing my dissertation it's a very, if anybody has gotten a PhD, it is a very emotionally draining labor project. To sit with chapters on chapters, to look for themes, to write from themes, to represent people in a respectable way. It is a hard, emotional, labor and intellectual process, and you need people, but your colleagues are stripped of you. You cannot see supervisors unless it's now you have to move online. My family was stripped of me, so I couldn't just go and have a coffee with a friend and talk about my struggles and my challenges. Those were all stripped from me in the pandemic, and yet my funders were still asking me, how far are you? We need to release money, but how far have you? Have you finished this last chapter? Because if this chapter is not coming, there's no funding. No funding means how am I going to survive? How am I going to live? You know, and so in this paper we documented those challenges that we were facing as black women who don't have generational wealth. It's not like I could go to my mother and say, hey mom, can you please pay my PhD? There is no money. My mom is a single mother, so she didn't have money. So I depended largely on funders, Rafiloe as well. We depended on our supervisors to write our reports. So if we're not producing, we're not getting money. And so we then, talk about this process of being black women in the academy, where it's the sense of Rafiloe had a contract job at UNISA, but it wasn't becoming permanent. And at the time, I was just getting odd gigs, like, come and lecture here, come and lecture there, but no one's offering you like the permanent post. And we were listening of our colleagues that became unemployed PhD candidates. And as we were reading this paper, we were faced with a multitude of graduates talking about this. Yes, there's a call to transform the academy. Yes, there's a call to transform higher education. And there's a call for, yes, we need more black women academics, or black women to be PhD holders. And yet, at the same time, the academy is not able to give these PhD students jobs. Mm-hmm. So there is a huge amount of PhD candidates or graduates that are unemployed. And so as we were writing this paper, and as we were coming to the end, Rafiloe and I looked at each other and we said, friend, does this mean after this project, we are going to be unemployed PhD graduates? And I said to her, like, what happens when everybody was telling me, go and get the PhD, the world's going to be your oyster after the PhD, you are going to get jobs in influx, you're going to be Dr. Peters, Dr. Makama, oh my word. And then the PhD is finished, and I'm applying for work, and I'm just getting rejected. I'm not getting interviews, and I was like, and this is what we write about in the paper, and we're like, but why is nobody telling us these things? People are not writing about this. People are silenced about these sort of things, and here we are actually struggling. Like, I'm like, I had a PhD, but I'm not getting work. And then Rafiloe was like, no, friend, are you going to conferences? Have you published? How much have you published? Because this is what they're looking for. And I was like, friend, because I also realized that I was a black woman, she was a black woman, we were not publishing because we also sat with such a lot of self-doubt. Yeah. What do we bring to the table of academy? Does my voice even matter in the academy that rejects us, that rejects women who looks like us? We're competing with our white counterparts who had like 50 publications. Mm-hmm. We hadn't even had one, because even publishing is a struggle. I mean, it's taken us almost 3 years to get this one paper published. And so as black women, we keep struggling and fighting, and at the end we were both like, friend, is it even worth it? And we kept pushing because we need other black women to know what it's actually like to get a PhD in South Africa, what it's actually like to sit in this precarious state where you don't know where to from here. And even now, she got a lecturing job at UCT. And instead of saying congratulations, people were giving her warnings. They were saying, friend, are you sure you want to be here? You know all the challenges that lie ahead. As a black woman, I don't think this is for you. And she was like, okay, so does the academy mean black women just go there to die? Do we just go there to perish? Then why have us in the academy? If you're saying it's a transformative agenda, we're here now, but now I'm being told that it's going to be a challenging road ahead. Me, on the other hand, couldn't get something. Eventually I get a postdoc, and then every year it's that thing of, okay, am I going to get funding for the next year? Am I going to get funding? But in the same time, I'm applying for work but not getting the job. So like it's you all the time ticking in. You're like, but I still got a child to feed at the same time, and I want to do this, but the academy isn't opening a space for me. So where do I fit as a black woman? Do I fit in this academy that's like it's not creating a space for me to operate within the borders, you know? And so Rafiloe and I sit in this daunting, because for me it's that thing, I don't know if I'm going to get funding to postdoc next year. There's 6 months left of the year, and for me that clock is ticking off. Am I going to be that unemployed PhD graduate now at the end of the year? And what does that mean? Because we are also in a larger community where black women are celebrated. It's, oh my gosh, you're a doctor, you got a PhD. Oh my gosh, people like us don't get the PhD. But the PhD means nothing if we are not able to operate in our fullness, if we are not accepted in the academy for being knowledge producers, you know, if we are not granted spaces to tell our truths, as they were talking about this morning. And so this paper was offered as a real experience of what it is like to be a black woman in South Africa, having sort of this, you know, oh my gosh, it was the cherry on the cake, the world was our oyster, and actually coming to the realization that after everything ends, you actually sit with this panic and this helplessness and this hopelessness, and you're trying to fight through the system, but it's also having to realize that we also need to preserve ourselves, because we cannot die young. Rafiloe and I are still under 35. And so this paper was offered as a way for us to also just reflect on our lives, reflect on the journey, offer a way for other PhD students who can relate or not relate to look at themselves in our story and to know that they're not alone, and so create some sort of community with other black women who may be facing similar stuff that we are facing. And maybe it becomes a call to the academy to open up spaces for black women with PhDs, especially because you called for us to get the PhDs. So open up a space for us, and not just sort of this, you know, the kumbaya. Oh no, you can get. No, actually open up a space for us where we can be authentically us, and not be given warning signs that we are going to perish in the academy. And so that's what this paper is. Hopefully it will be published soon, and you can have a look at it. It's been a long day. The multiple emails to this editor, guys. Wow. And so that is the paper of our experiences that we have offered into the academy, and we hope that it's something that, you know, people will work with and grapple with, and hopefully it doesn't become other people's stories. Thank you.
We're happy it gives us possibility for conversation later, because I think many of us can relate, because it is almost all our stories at different points. So thank you very much for that authentic and honest and vulnerable contribution. Our next presenter is JulianaMakuchiNfah-Abbenyi. Her paper is on being an African woman academic in America, and she is at North Carolina State University. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My piece is a creative nonfiction paper, and when I saw the call for the Afems conference, I was like, I've never been to Afems. This would be my first time to come to Afems. And I said, given the space that you are providing here, I'm going to share a few things about what it means to be a woman academic in America, given that we are rightly so seen as privileged and all of those things, but we have a lot of things to navigate in in the United States as well. So I'll just go ahead and read what I have for you here. And in the interest of time, I'm going to skip some of the parts of what I have, and then we can chat during the Q&A. It always begins with the question, where are you from? No, really, where are you really from? Where is that accent from? I might end with a pronouncement about the unpronounceability of my name.
Yeah.
I have lived with these familiar questions most African immigrants in the United States have to answer about their place of birth or their origins, questions often posed by total strangers. Such encounters capture a human quality, our curiosity about others, about their difference, but it is one thing to be curious about another and deploying that difference as a weapon. In November 2019, my son and I went to a Sam's Club to buy some iPhones. A few sentences into our interaction with a representative who served us, name tag Steve, he said, I don't mean to be racist, but you people sound like you are from Wakanda.
Wow.
That is my favorite movie, he added, rather pleased with himself. He fed my phone number into the computer, pulled my name up on the screen, and made a joke about not being able to pronounce my name. It is made up of A's, B's, E's, and I's. Just read what you see, I said. Try it. It's as easy to say as Wakanda. Whether I am treated as a character in a pulp fiction movie or denied the one thing that defines me as a Beba, an African, a routine conversation that begins with, I don't mean to be racist, and ends with, I can't say your name, captures the myriad ways in which I am under the microscope of the white gaze and most routinely find ways to negotiate or deflect the sting of that gaze on my Black African female body. My first academic job in the United States was at St. Cloud State University in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I was on a one-year contract at the College of Fine Arts and Humanities. My job was to engage with faculty from different departments across the college on the theme, Curriculum Transformation, Integrating Non-Western, Non-Dominant Perspectives. Each quarter, I held workshops and met with faculty for discussions about syllabus content, syllabus revision, and the multiple ways they could integrate non-Western, non-dominant perspectives into the curriculum. One morning, the first week of my second month, I heard a knock on my door. In walked a tall, wiry, white male figure. I was sitting at my desk, and he stood towering over me. He introduced himself, said he had heard I was a native of Cameroon, and asked whether I speak French. When I responded in the affirmative, he said he needed my help with translating something. He then handed me a wood carving. An engraving depicted the image of a fleeing figure. Below the image were the words, un homme marron. Even as I write about this interaction with that senior white male professor, I wonder how I was able to maintain my composure. I remember I was stunned. My facial muscles felt as if they were turned into ice. For the longest moment, he stared at my face, looking for the slightest reaction. I offered none. I took a deep breath, unlaced my fingers, and stared at the wood carving. A brown man, I said, lifting my head and looking straight at him. I remember my lips moving and a voice telling him I will look further into it. He nodded and walked out of my office. This was my introduction to America and American racism, from an entitled old white male colleague who understood perfectly the violent intent of his request and intrusion into my life. For the moment I held that wood carving in my hand and read the words, un homme marron, which means runaway slave. My heart, as my people say, fell into my stomach, and for a second I could not breathe. How much thought had he put into this vicious gesture, I wondered. Was this wood carving resting in a drawer or hanging on the wall in his office, and he simply had to yank it off the wall, or had he brought it from home that morning? I imagined him picking up that relic, leaving his office, probably walking past the French department building where he probably had friends or knew some faculty, and with one determined step after another, making his way to my office in the English department. This is my welcome to America, I thought. Is this why St. Cloud is nicknamed White Cloud, as I had been dutifully informed by a colleague my very first week on campus? Was this man telling me St. Cloud needed to be and remain white? Sure. Was I intruding on its ability to be and remain white? I felt violated, as if someone had smacked me across the face with a baseball bat. When he walked out of my office, I filled my lungs with air, took a deep breath, exhaled, and looked around me. I wondered how this could be happening to me, not on the streets or in a supermarket or at the mall, but at an institution of higher learning. Things like this shouldn't be happening in a place like this. But there it was, a blatant warning, a harmless-looking piece of wood carving reminding me of what I am supposed to be, a runaway fugitive slave who ought to or should have learned her place and stayed there. It didn't matter that I had just graduated from McGill University, the top Canadian university. This white man was on a mission to remind me of my history, my Africanness, my blackness. I stared at the black man, the scars on his back clearly exposed by the tattered shirt, the rolled up legs of his pants tightly hugging the skin above his knees, the long stride propelling him forward, all the while casting a furtive look over his right shoulder. I stared at this black man and thought of the horrors black women, mothers and daughters endured, the horrors that this white male colleague intended to keep front and center. It was as if he was saying to me, you think was that bad for him? Think how much worse it was and is for women like you. You think you can escape your manifest destiny? I still don't know what he was or had been expecting me to say. Was he looking for the angry black female response? Was he expecting the reaction of the primitive, uncivilized, ignorant, and oppressed African woman that would confirm the shameless audacity of his request or presence in my office? My calm and reticence must have surprised him. He had strode into my office, determined to get an outburst out of me. He must have thought I would fight him and tell him I was exactly where I was supposed to be, but he left my office with a befuddled look on his face. During this encounter, I subconsciously leaned into Patricia Hill Collins's feminist standpoints on being an outsider within. Collins reminds us that, quote, black female intellectuals have made creative use of their marginality, their outsider within status, to produce black feminist thought that reflects a special standpoint on self, family, and society by demystifying white power and placing greater trust in the creative potential of their own personal and cultural biographies, end quote. She further asserts, quote, outsider within status is bound to generate tension, for people who become outsiders within are forever changed by their new status. Outsiders within occupy a special place. They become different people and conserve the creative tension of outsider within status by encouraging and institutionalizing outsider within ways of seeing, which is what I was doing at St. Cloud State before I was confronted by this man. That St. Cloud encounter took place in 1994. In May 2023, almost 30 years later, as I was writing this piece, North Carolina legislators were debating and arguing over a bill that would expand the eligibility requirements for North Carolina opportunity scholarships. I'm going to skip this paragraph for the benefit of time. This black legislator was making the point that these scholarships were necessary, and a white legislator just interrupted him and really said awful things. I can share the quote with you during the Q&A, but he was saying, how did you go he was trying to devalue and really devalue this man's intelligence, why he went to Harvard and all of that. It was just awful, happening in the legislature. And the attack on this black legislator brought back flashbacks of the times colleagues have wondered out loud or outright asked me how, as a mother of 3 small children and all the way from Africa, they always say that, all the way from Africa, I got to study at McGill. Clearly, such inquisitive moments only reinforce the ease with which privileged academics can choose to forget and or ignore our lived histories of slavery and colonialism. Like the Harvard-educated black legislator, my African womanhood and motherhood are as such constructed as negatives that should have barred me from access to McGill and any success that results. I left St. Cloud State University at the end of my one-year contract and assumed a full-time position at the University of Southern Mississippi. The warm southern climate was a welcome change from the long cold winters of Quebec and Minnesota. I looked forward to relishing the heat. That was before I found out it could get much hotter in the south than any of the places I had lived in Cameroon. I was even more excited for the opportunity to wear my colorful African clothing all year round. I must confess that after all these years, one thing I miss the most about Africa since I moved to North America is color. Yes, those vibrant, abundant colors that invite and sometimes overwhelm as you walk down a street in an African city, haggle with vendors at a market, sway hips at a party, chant hymns at a church or at celebrations of all sorts. I miss walking down the street back home watching African women going about their business as if they own the world in their made-to-measure tailored dresses, flowing gowns, floral wrappers, and elaborately braided hair. I've always surrounded myself with color, the one thing that keeps me nostalgically tethered to my place of birth and the spunk of the mothers and women who raised me. I'm going to skip this sentence, this area where I'm talking about my dad and the flowers that he planted whenever we moved. When I moved to Hattiesburg, Mississippi for the first time at an American university, I fully embraced stepping out in my African fashions, my first full-time job, I meant to say. Some days I wore elaborately embroidered African clothes to work. Occasionally, a colleague would comment in passing, "You're looking very African today, Juliana." Nevertheless, I had a senior colleague who would purposefully stop to say, "I love your costume." At first, I shrugged off his comment, thinking that would be the end of it, but he repeated this statement whenever our paths crossed and I was dressed African. His comment roused my attention to the fact that he always wore a suit and tie to work. One lucky day, I bumped into him and he was wearing a pair of blue jeans and a brown blazer. "I love your costume," I said with a smile. His face, as we say in Africa, turned red. That redness familiar to white skin infused with the heat and burn of the tropical sun. He was used to saying, "I love your costume," and would keep on walking. But when I said, "I love your costume," he stiffened and stopped abruptly next to me. He didn't say a word. I couldn't distinguish his anger from his confusion. What was he wearing that looked remotely like a costume, he must have wondered. He was, after all, wearing something that is globally recognized as quintessentially American, in the same way that the clothes that I wore that he was fond of complimenting would be globally recognized as African. I refrained from asking him how and why my African clothes were costumes and his American jeans were not. Hattiesburg, Mississippi is a 90-minute drive from New Orleans, and we were both too familiar with costumes of Mardi Gras celebrations next door. Yet he could profess that my African clothes were costumes in a way that his American jeans were not. After that awkward pause, he walked away. That was the last day he ever said those words, "I love your costumes," to me. I have learned over the years of my living and working in America that this perennial request for self-identification that in turn affects identity formation, meaning-making, and access of belonging requires a measure of situatedness in time, the space one finds oneself in, and one's location. Recently, this drive for situated knowledge has intensified with the use of pronouns in public discourse. Identifying one's pronouns has become a common practice in both public and private spaces in America. Individuals indicate their pronouns in email signatures, on Zoom signage, conference badges, social media handles, etc. Sometimes individuals include a "why this is important" hyperlink to their email signature. One such hyperlink directs you to an explanatory article on my institution's Office of Institutional Equity and Diversity webpage. It recommends, quote, "setting the example with personal gender pronouns," and opens with this statement: "Hi, my name is Cameron. My pronouns are she, her, hers." One short sentence added to a verbal introduction brings with it many things: clarification, significance, and affirmation. In return, it gives others understanding, a space to feel included, and the opportunity to affirm others, end quote. These marks of identification are set to promote clarification, to be supportive of a positive, affirming, and inclusive workplace. They are meant to indicate shared and/or unique personal experiences that can be employed for coalition and collaborative purposes depending on the time, the place, and space where pronouns are used. Nonetheless, the public use and display of pronouns can be purely performative when used to further or reinforce power structures and systems of oppression, especially in spaces where indicating or affirming one's pronouns can be leveraged for political purposes, can draw ire and sometimes outright judgment and confrontation. The representation and display of pronouns can and have come at a psychological and physical cost to individuals and or groups of people. I'm just going to skip, something happened at a conference recently where I was, and I added that here, but it had to do with the issue of pronouns, so I'll just skip that paragraph. I was born and raised in Cameroon, where I lived all my childhood and early adult life. As an African woman who has lived and worked in an American academic space for almost 3 decades, I end this essay about African feminisms with my struggle with pronouns, a struggle that began before the pandemic but was exacerbated during the pandemic when most professional communication and interactions moved online and identifying one's pronouns on Zoom became the norm, at least in North America. This practice of sharing pronouns highlights how I must once again interrogate my ability to define what it means to be a woman, a feminist, and an African woman academic entrenched in Western academic spaces, discourses, and practices. Were I to introduce myself following the recommendation to set the example with personal pronouns, gender pronouns, I would say, hi, my name is JulianaMakuchiNfah-Abbenyi, and would be expected to announce myself with the pronouns she, her, or she, her, hers. I believe that individuals must and should be afforded the choice of self-identification. The question I confront is whether the pronouns I am expected to publicly display adequately capture who JulianaMakuchiNfah-Abbenyi is, a Beba Cameroonian African woman, that is, the wholeness of my being. To begin, my people, the Beba, and our Beba language do not have words that one would identify as pronouns. A Beba is always identified as Mwamange, meaning a child that is female, or Mwambane, meaning a child that is male. One could argue that the Beba still link a child to femaleness and maleness, and rightly so. But given that languages are dynamic and changing, I would also argue that the descriptive gesture in the language leaves open the possibility of the Beba identifying a child with a gender attribute that is not yoked to maleness and femaleness, as in a child that is fill in the blank. Second, a Beba is not being identified as Mowa or child that is. They are identified according to their age and elderhood. 2 minutes, okay. Let me just let me skip. Wish I told me Ella would have left that. I know. Yeah, so it's fine. Okay. I go into the whole thing with pronouns and all of that, and so I'll just go to the last part of this. I do not use pronouns, even though the administrative position I occupy would recommend, and in some instances require it. When asked why I do not use pronouns in my email signature or on Zoom, I find it difficult to respond and often choose to respond or explain away my hesitancy. Here are examples of some of the responses I get when I take the time to explain this affirmation of pronouns through the lens of Beba custom. What a quaint tradition. I get it, but that is a bit strange. You are not a man after all. What a beautiful custom. Funny how this hasn't changed with education and modern practices. I have learned to withhold this knowledge as a measure of self-protection against unpleasant responses or responses that seek to devalue or hollow out my ability to bring some Beba culture to bear on my understanding or my redefinition of the use of pronouns. I go into that redefinition in those 2 pages that we just skipped. I have also chosen not to use pronouns because she, her, hers are incomplete, inadequate, and limiting. She, her, hers reject or erase Beba flexible gender ideologies that endow me with the ability to embody both femaleness and maleness. She, her, hers dictate what I can embody and does not carry the full weight of my femaleness, womanhood, and Beba life experiences. There's a familiar saying in academia that Black people have to leave parts of themselves at the door before walking into the hallowed halls of American institutions of higher learning. If only parts of me are allowed access to these academic spaces, using inadequate pronouns only furthers that splitting of myself. Sure. Am I therefore less of a feminist or social justice warrior for not publicly embracing a display of pronouns? I sometimes wonder. This is my conclusion, last paragraph. Bell Hooks has asserted that our location calls on us, quote, to participate in the formation of counter-hegemonic cultural practice to identify the spaces where we begin the process of revision, of choosing the margin as a space of radical inclusion. Hooks maintains that marginality is much more than a site of deprivation. In fact, it is also the site of radical possibility, a space of resistance, and further clarifies that she is not speaking of marginality one wishes to lose or to give up or surrender as part of moving into the center, but rather as a site one stays in, clings to, even because it nourishes one's capacity to resist. Following Hooks, I have chosen not to give up or surrender my marginality as part of moving to the center. My marginal status offers me the possibility of radical perspective from which to see and create, to imagine alternative new worlds within a purported liberal democracy that is America. To the outside world, I am a privileged academic, and rightly so. But my daily interactions belie and cloak my marginal status, and so I have learned to use my marginal status not as a site of deprivation, but as a site of radical possibility. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliana, for that really beautiful and also painful reflection on how the ways in which we're marked in through the sort of coloniality of gender has limits, and it also has epistemic limits because it's ontologically confined. I'm very pleased to introduce Ntsekhe, who's doing who's presenting on behalf of herself and the co-authors. Were Linda Mensah, Mathe, Ntsekhe, and the paper is Virtual Onto-Epistemic Communities as Spaces of Radical Care and Transformative Learning. Ntsekhe will be presenting.
Hello everyone, I hope it comes tonight. Is it okay if I stand here?
Yes.
And I apologize in a way for using the PowerPoint. Part of it is so that you don't have to look at me. My very dear colleagues Linda and Mathe would have loved to be here and unfortunately couldn't. And so I am presenting our paper on their behalf. This is always the issue, eh? Is how to. Oh, there we go. Yes. Okay. And it's a very hectic title, Virtual Onto-Epistemic Communities as Spaces of Radical Care and Transformative Learning. And so it's very interesting that this talk comes at the end of two women who have told us their stories of epistemic violence. Mm-hmm. And in many ways what I'm going to present here is a safe place from the kind of epistemic violences that people have experienced. So let me tell you about it. So I don't know if you know that Charlene Khan, who has set up, who's one of the main organizers of the Afems conference, she was here at Rhodes, and she started an African feminist reading group every 2 weeks that went very well, and they've written a paper on it, which we found fascinating, because what this paper is about an African feminist reading group that we began. And our paper is different to their paper, which is lovely. There's some things that are similar. They say, we see our work as continuing the dialogues we have with each other in this entangled state. I love that. And we do not seek to hide the messiness of this dialogic process. Our paper was written in response to a call by Feminist Africa, a call for papers on the topic of popular education, popular Pan-Africanist education as an alternative for the formal silos that education usually resides in. And so how we have structured the paper is in response to that call, and I'll show you how. And so where Charlene and Fuad and Zodwa, in their paper, they use quite strong methodology and explain how they did their research, etc. And we haven't really done that. We're kind of responding by the seat of our pants to ideas in African feminism that resonate with us. So popular education apparently is well, I'll talk about that just now, but it's a thing that we're responding to. We also talk about the embodiment of knowledge and how that intersects with the virtual digital space. And then we talk about this space, this intentional community that we established, how it can be a space of healing and transformative learning. So let me get into it. So an intentional community. So on the Feminist Africa site, where they made this call, they said something to the effect of popular and informal knowledge making arises from the intention to recognize, value, inspire, and challenge each other to grow, transform, and find liberation. So the African Feminist Reading Group that I'm going to talk to you about has had 3 different iterations. I'll explain just now. And actually, currently, it's on a pause. It's had a slow start this year, but it's going to continue, and it will change again as it continues. But we find that what is interesting about our reading group is that it unsettles the kind of dominant way that we all find ourselves immersed in the educational space. It's just got a whole nother feel. I find this presenting at a conference like this, because it's an African feminist space, I'm not as nervous as I would be in one of those other spaces where you know people are busy thinking of a kind of question that isn't a question at all, but is a kind of critique of, and it's just kinder to be in a space that is dominated by African feminist principles. And so that's what we found. We found a lot of resonance with what happens in our group. So, and Mama mentions this, I want to say, so Amina Mama has written this beautiful piece, and it's in a Feminist Africa journal. It's in a dedicated journal where she was the editor. The whole journal is available. I download it, and there it is. Feminist Africa, hello. You get the Palgrave Handbook of African Feminism. Can you access anything on it? Not at all. And so I just, find that quite ironic. So thank you, Amina Mama and Feminist Africa. But she says, what African feminism does is, because it doesn't fit neatly into the boxes that are available in academia, the methodology embraces transdisciplinary methodology in order to subvert the disciplinary divisions. Simone, I love, was it you who said something about the it might have been, I don't know, my memory goes as I age. But, you know, when you come into an African feminist space, maybe it was our keynote, anything goes in a way. You can experiment. You can be experimental. You can bring new ideas and find a way to work with it. And we found this to be true. So the way the feminist reading group worked is Linda and I were both being supervised by me here and Linda in Scotland. She's Ghanaian, but she's doing her work in Scotland. And our supervisors didn't know African feminism, and we were both insisting on using it. And so they were friends. And they said, well, start a reading group, you know, so we can find out more about African feminism. And so we did. And so it was quite small at first, and it grew as, you know, people heard about it and joined us. And in that first iteration of the group, Saskia, who is Linda's supervisor in Scotland, alerted us to a call for proposals. Scotland every year has an online methodology course. Oh, by the way, this was at the start of the pandemic. So my PhD also, which was going to be an in-person gathering, no, everything online. So everything was changing. Anyway, there was so she said to me and Linda, why don't we put in a proposal to run an African feminist research methodology course? And I mean, neither of us felt like we are experts in African feminism. I don't think anyone feels like they, and you know, a white person also. Anyway, so we said, okay, let's do it. We put in a proposal. We cheekily said, if we are successful, we would like to match the number of Scottish PhD graduates with African ones. And they said yes, it's a free course. And so we had, I think we had around, I can't really remember the number, it was around 15 to 20 Scottish students and 15 to 20 mostly South African students. And we ran this course online, 5 sessions, Linda and I alternated, and it was a wonderful course. We absolutely loved it. And afterwards we've written a paper about that as well. Afterwards we invited the people who graduated from that course to join the African Feminist Reading Group. So it became bigger, and then we also decided instead of me chairing it and bringing the readings each time, it would now be a revolving chair. So each week we decide who's going to run the next session. They choose the reading or the video or whatever it is, and hold the discussion. The format of it is that it's an hour online. We firstly just meet and land and bring ourselves to the space, and then we go through a particular reading or whatever the person has brought. A poem, we've had a video, we've had so whatever people bring. And then the third version was when I ran a similar course to that here at Rhodes as part of the postgraduate space, and invited people from that group to join. So it's grown over the years. I keep sending out messages to say, please let me know if you want to go off the mailing list, and no one ever does. They want to stay because you get this rich resource of readings, of videos, of poems, plus the audio of the discussion that we have. So even though it's a small group that actually meets each time, you know, it's anything between 6 and 16, but that is a holding space for all kinds of people who are accessing it vicariously and in their own time. So some of the principles that have become real for us in our reading group is firstly the idea of knowledge being embodied. And I think this is something that Western Cartesian dualism doesn't recognize, and it's been a wonderful way for us to keep very clear that our bodies matter, And of course, it's a way for us to question our positionality, because it's not just bodies that hold knowledge. Knowledge holds the oppressions that we find in society. So knowledge embodies certain kinds of things, and our bodies hold knowledge in particular kinds of ways. And so to be very aware of the embodiment of knowledge means that I, as a white person, for instance, whose ancestors were the colonizers, I am aware, I need to constantly be aware of that positioning. But it's because it's a space that is functioning because of African feminist principles. I'm not, who my ancestors were doesn't count there, because it's a different liberatory kind of a space where we conscientize ourselves about things in order to undo and resist and, what was the word this morning, refuse the colonial inheritance that we get. I love Akesha's work. If you don't know her work, please Google her. We know Akesh. She writes, she's got video talks, and she's just amazing. And she has said that a political intervention in a hostile knowledge-making context, feminist epistemic communities, I love that. That's kind of how we see ourselves, facilitate the co-creation of knowledge production spaces, which are generative rather than extractive. And it's very interesting, because we've got some Scottish people as part of our reading group. And the relations of North and South as a very extractive kind of relationship. And so part of, when Linda and I presented the course, we were kind of wondering, but why would Scottish people want to study African feminism? Is it also to extract? And I've had, of course, questioned that about me. What do I want to do do I want to use something, appropriate something? I don't, for that reason, I don't call myself an African feminist. I don't, I love African feminism as a theory that speaks to the reality of the students that I work with. And so what we have to think about, how to make the space that we're in as a reading group to be generative, to build, to grow all of us, rather than to feel like it's extracting from us. Knowledge, the body, and Onto-Epistemic communities. Mina Salami is amazing as well. If you don't know her, please look her up. She's got a blog called Ms. Afropolitan, which is such a holding space for incredible resources and histories and archive, really. And she says, and she talks about how knowledge transforms into matter in how we live. And I think this is what we have found in this reading group, is that because we're looking at African feminisms, but we're also, you can't help being affected by African feminism in a different way to how you are affected, say, by Marxism or just constructionism or whatever. Those are theories that you can study and use and move away from. But African feminism, it affects how you live in many ways, And so we find that our pedagogy and our way of holding the space has been infused with the subject matter, if you like, of the feminist reading group. And then to just talk about the digital space, and I was very fascinated that Dina talked about this in the keynote. And what we have found is that the digital space, because it's closed, because it's contained, but it has been so liberating. It liberated us in terms of running the course, firstly, because across continents, instead of having to mission to get visas, to go and have a conference, and all of the traumas and things of traveling, and of the racism inherent in all of these things. An online space frees that, and it allows people to attend who could never have attended. And so we find, so Aya has written an Palgrave handbook, and I could only read the abstract. But in the abstract I was going, oh, what? I want to read this. But she says, the oppressive context that Akesh was talking about continues into online spaces, which are proving to be, to embody these kinds of oppressions, as Dina was saying. But she says it strengthens the argument for a radical shift in developing alternative digital networks, grounded in Afrofuturism, feminist methodologies, and decolonial practices. And I was thinking about this as I was listening to you, Simone, and to Juliana, that the online networks that you can have during a pandemic or when you're in a different continent, these are the spaces that can hold you and feed you when you're in a hostile kind of environment. And we have all found this. So we found the digital technology to be an enabling factor in this situation. We've got the audios that we share, and it allows us to meet in different continents, different languages, different time zones. And it's an informal learning space. And the reason why we wanted to write this paper is because, just because it's an informal learning space, every second Wednesday kind of go, oh yeah, it's the feminist reading group again, and it's a sort of sense of relief. It's, even if you're doing the presenting, you don't feel anxious about that. You just go, my people, And it's this kind of space that feeds us, that we wanted to write on it. Because I think it's not a marketing brochure that we're writing, but it kind of feels a little bit like that. Because really everyone should have one. Where you can't find the people in your environment that are going to feed your soul. This kind of online group is a way to do it. And so that's why we're calling it virtual Onto-Epistemic, because it's not just about the knowledge. It is about, we do bring ourselves. Linda is there with her child, coming in and out of the screen. And, and we very much, we ask, how has school started again? How, and the questions we ask each other are not just about, have you read, have you seen? It's also not text heavy. And the interesting thing about this is that the digital archive again interrupts that reliance on text in the academy. And these, to listen to these women speaking online again is just a really beautiful thing. One more slide, and then I'm done. So these are not African feminists, but they theorize against Western theorizing. They're Australian, they're Maori people. And they say the act of theorizing vulnerability. Oh, so the previous slide, what I forgot to say is sometimes we share our own work on the African feminist reading space, which is beautiful because you're going to get friendly fire, from each other, and it's a wonderful space to do that. And this whole idea about making yourself vulnerable, they say the act of theorizing vulnerability, healing, and resistance at the intersection of gender, race, class, sexuality, and disability have been identified as foundational to non-Western feminisms and scholarship, where lived experiences situated at the margins fuse to create theory in the flesh, which urge women of color to create a praxis that enables healing, survival, and resistances. And we have found this group to be so. Linda and I have written a paper together. Linda, Mathe, and I are writing a paper together. Other people have collaborated on projects together coming from this group. And so it's becoming a generative epistemic space, but it's based on a very strong ontological way of behaving with each other, acting with each other, based on African feminist principles. The end.
Thank you so much, Ntsekhe, for sharing with us what kinds of work enables life-giving practices in the face of an academy that will attempt to debilitate and create varying conditions of instability and precarity for us. I'm going to open up for questions. So there's one in the back. Hi.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ms. Corinne, University of Fort Hare. I'd like to say thank you so much for your presentations. I'd like to touch so much on the first two presentations by Simone and Juliana. And to Simone, I remember when I started my PhD, somebody told me that this is not actually a PhD, it's a permanent head damage.
Oh,
You
wow.
say. So when you were giving your narrative, I was like, if I knew you before, I was going to say, who asked you to talk about me? Because you're telling my story, you know, I was like, who gives you the right to talk about me, the journey that I've gone through? And I remember reading one of the articles, I can't remember the name, but I caught, they said universities are fucked up places for black women. They are totally fucked up places for black women because there are so many things that, close quote, there are so many things that one has to go through, especially if you are a mother and you are trying to find that balance between being a mom, maybe being a daughter-in-law, being a sister-in-law, being a sister, being an auntie, and also trying to catch up with the deadlines, and of course the funding, and of course living on the edge every time when the year is about to come to an end and you're asking yourself what is going to happen come December 31st, when everybody's like celebrating, yay, we're about to go to New Year, you're like, I wish I could just go back, you know, to media. So yeah, thank you for that. But I would have loved also to hear about, maybe in your paper, maybe you could have talked about the theories that you have used, you know, in your paper, so that we get that the flow that, you know, intersect or that talk to your journey, and all the best with the postdoctoral fellow, and yeah, you get him there and you will be there. And then to Juliana, if I may call you Juliana.
Of course.
Thank you. What a paper and what a journey. As I'm saying, both of you're talking about things that we get to, what you call this, we get to experience every day in academia. Like sometimes I'll say to myself, if I get into some other spaces, I'm like, okay, Benita, pretend you've got water in your mouth, you're not going to say anything, you know, because sometimes you find someone who says something that makes you so mad because you are looking back at where you are coming from. Like, I remember when you were talking, you said somebody would be like, all the way from Africa, you know, with 3 kids. And then, but you don't know what pushed me. And then also you don't know what I am looking for, what I am hoping to gain. So I think right now, as we're here even in Afems, because maybe the other problem that even we have is black feminist women, sometimes maybe instead of supporting each other, we also have another PhD that they call it pull-it-down syndrome. You know, so it's that time of standing up and supporting each other. If there is a call, even is it for a job or something, and you know somebody qualifies, send it out, you know, to them. Let's write about each other. Let's quote each other. Sometimes it's because maybe I get a paper that I'm being asked, Ms. B, can you please review this? And I'm so quick to decline to say I can't. Yet I know it's even within my niche area, and of course it will be a blinded paper, but you don't know, maybe I've missed out reviewing on a paper, and that was actually assisted you to publish. And you know, academia, they say either you publish or you perish. So you see, it's all these terms that I use that actually scare you to say, and we're supposed to enter
Yeah.
into this. And we've always been told that, academia still remains a male-dominated, space. Even if you're given a position to lead in academia, you're just there to fill in the numbers, but your voice is not counted, at the end of the day. I can talk until the cows come home.
There's another question there.
Okay, cool. Thank you all so much for your presentations. I think I've got two questions, and the first one I think is going to apply to all of you. And so either one of you can take it or you can all take it. I think similar to the previous speaker, I'm very curious about, I think right now I'm curious about a kind of post-PhD mental health. And I think that's a conversation that is kind of missing. And someone was saying, is there any literature or anything that we know that we can refer to around a kind of post-PhD depression? And I think, particularly as Black women, Kharnita and I were in the same, we just graduated together, but I'm struggling. I'm really struggling with my mental health, with my willpower, with any desire to do anything really. And I'm wondering, maybe on a very kind of practical level, if you can share kind of strategies that you're familiar with, or spaces. And I think over and above consulting with a therapist or anything like that, I'm just curious about whether those spaces exist. Because I do think, it is one thing to speak to Dr. Makama or Dr. Peters or whatever, and I'm just wondering if there are any spaces that can actually hold us in this post-PhD space. Or if there's a possibility that we might be able to form that community with that intention of affirming that you're still great, right, even after that. But also at the same time, it's okay to go through these mental and emotional, motions that come with completing, and then this existential crisis that comes with that, and all of that. So I'm just curious about that. And then the second question I think is for Corinne, and it's around, I think, so you frame this African feminist reading group as a safe space, right? And I'm hearing you speak about how there's different types of people, races, ages, and all of that. I think maybe I've got a little bit of a concern, particularly around virtual spaces and how accessible they are. And I think since we've become more heavily dependent on connecting virtually, I don't know about other people, but I've certainly experienced spaces that have been infiltrated by people that don't have great intentions for the space, because it's so easy to just log in and and I've been in certain spaces that are meant to be safe, right? I fully understand that, and generally they are, but every now and again you'll get that misogynistic loser who wants to come and talk nonsense because they're behind a screen, and it's easy to just say, well, so I'm just wondering what your experience of that has been, but particularly how to manage that. And I think even for Juliana, my last question, sorry, but it's also just about like managing, I don't know, I get very angry, I get pissed off. I really get pissed off. I think there are things that, I just feel like there are things that people just shouldn't be saying anymore. You know what I'm saying? And so in feminist reading spaces like that, but even when people make comments about being African or about how to pronounce your name or things like that, I'm just wondering, like, how do we manage that? How do we code switch safely? But even in academic spaces, it's one thing to say, I'm going to rebel, right? Because I'm precarious and I'm on contract, right? But how do we do that safely? I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do we make a point, but without jeopardizing the little bit of employment that we currently have and things like that? So, yeah.
Thank you. We'll take one more question
Before we respond.
Thank you for allowing me to ask this question. I wanted to just ask Simone. I have similar experience, but I wanted to ask, how possible is it to expect kindness and compassion from an institution, a neoliberal institution that commodifies human relations, and and therefore its relationship with us is about extracting value. And because we consider the commodity, we're disposable. So when we seek inclusion from such an institution, are we not actually giving legitimacy to that kind of, I mean, universities are violent spaces for all marginalized groups. But yeah, shouldn't we think about what kind of demands do we make, okay, in the face of that violence, to ensure that we do not actually, through our resistance, give legitimacy to that which is the cause of our experiences.
Thank you. So, who wants
Okay, cool, yeah. Can I go first and then?
Go.
Okay, cool. Go for it. So, the question at the back, that's scary, that you said it's your whole story exact, but in talking, I got caught to the experience and I left out. We do talk about the theories we use, and we talk about intersectionality and looking at how our different positionalities intersect to produce particular experiences that we've had in the academy. So that is focused on the paper. We also talk about the methodology, also ethnography. I don't know if I said it right, but we talk about the methodology and what that methodology allowed us to turn everything onto us and to analyze our stories and to make our stories the main character, because we've never done that. It's always been about the other people, and now we've had to turn the gaze on us. So that is spoken about in the paper, and the possibilities of that method and that theory, and what it allows us. To your question about the depression that comes after the PhD, that comes with the panic and the helplessness and the hopelessness, I have yet to encounter a space like the one that Corinne speaks about. I have yet to find a space like that, because it's almost like I felt it was a shameful thing to say that I'm suffering. It was a shameful thing to say I'm not finding work, because everybody put me on a pedestal. I mean, after my PhD, I had radio interviews and I was on the Mail Guardian list, and I was getting everything, but at the same time back home I'm not getting jobs. So I'm like, and I'm feeling the sense of I'm not enough and I'm not worthy, and like I did everything right and I'm trying to do everything, but I'm still not enough for the academy. So you're feeling with all those emotions that you can't speak about, because people are not ready for you to speak about those. They're not ready to hear that, you know. And so you also don't want to disappoint people, because you want, so people say, oh, what's Simone, you're on this, oh, what's Simone, you're so, and I couldn't tell people, like, I had to say, oh yes, no guys, oh yeah, so happy, because I was, there's that fear, and writing this paper, it was us confronting those, like, we're vulnerable with people, like, we were telling people, like, we struggle, like, we are living almost like on a day-to-day, what happens next, where to next, right? Despite all of this accolades, and I mean, it's a huge achievement. We're black women, we got PhDs, we didn't think it was possible, but yet here we are, you know, and so I don't think people are ready for us to have that conversation about, because I do have depression, but you've got a PhD. Do you understand? It's like the most coveted thing that you can get. You've got 4 degrees, you like made it in life. And then I tell people, no, but I actually didn't, or I don't feel enough and I don't feel adequate, you know. So I think that there's a possibility for us to have that, because it sounds like many of us are in the same boat. It sounds like many of us are struggling with a lot. So maybe the virtual sort of space is something that we can think about and look to create as a sort of healing space and transformative space, and a space where we still hold each other and affirm each other. And maybe, you know, the jobs come in there, like, hey, this job is out there, I didn't get the job, talk through that, what is that, you know? Yeah. And then to your question of, I think maybe it was sort of I don't know, maybe a sort of a hope that these institutions would hold maybe people that would be compassionate. And I think of my supervisors. I thank God for my supervisors, because they were the most caring people I've encountered in the academy. I had Floretta Bonzaya and Ntsekhe, and they opened up the hub, which is not virtual, but it was a space where we could go and talk about our struggles and talk about our battles and be held in the space of people that actually cared about us. I mean, in my master's one time, I went homeless and Ntsekhe was like, Simone, I'm going to do in my house. Come and live with me. I will take care of everything. And I was so shocked because I'm like, why would they even care about the fact that I don't have a place to stay? But they showed me such a lot of kindness and such a lot of love. And even when I told them I'm struggling, they would say, you know, Simone, what are you struggling with? How can we help you? How can we move around the funders? I mean, Floretta one time even like wrote around things that we get funding, even though my things weren't actually aligned, but she played around, you know. And so I think those moments and finding those people within the academy and also becoming those people, because now I supervise students and I supervise black women who are going through stuff. One of my students said, Simone, I'm going to give up. I'm done. I can't do this. And having to realize that, Simone, that was once upon a time you.
Yeah.
So are you also going to be like, no, I don't care. We have things. Come. Then you're my first student. You need to. No, I said to her, I get this, and if this is really how you feel, then it's okay, because nobody tells us it's okay to feel this way. We always told like pick it up, you know. So I think, yeah, it's a tricky thing, and this thing of needing money to survive and having to dance around this academy, it's a tricky thing. And can we move away from it? No, unless we create generational wealth and we get money and we can do. But right now, sadly, we are still puppets because we need money to survive, and especially when we've got dependents. And I think with Rafiloe, when it was the protest, and some of the students were saying, why are you not protesting? But you're talking about, and she had to remind them that she's a single mom, this is her salary. If she goes against the institution, it has consequences for her.
Yeah.
And she came to me and she was like, friend, how do I do this? And I said, unfortunately, we also have to work within these institutions, and there's some things that we also can't run from. So I don't even know.
The idea of, you know, I've just built on that with the idea of, you know, mentoring others, to recognize the fact that there are certain things that were not available to us. To myself, for instance, I had to manage and think through navigating American academia and the professional step by myself. But now, you know, because I've gone through that, I consciously, it's my way of giving back to my students and other people that I automatically, if they need my help, if they need to be mentored, I would, if I have the time out. If I don't have the time, I'll be very honest and I'll say, I wish I had the time to do this right now, but I can't do this. Can we do this in a month or 2 months? But I'm always ready to mentor and to help and move things forward. And it's very helpful for other people to be able to get an experience, not experience the academic space in the same way that some of us actually experienced it, and that is a personal thing that I find very important. So mentorship is very, very helpful, and just a place where someone can come and just sit down, come into my office and sit down, and I just listen, and they just talk, and they just talk, and they just talk, and they just talk, and at the end they'll be like, do you want me? No, I don't want to do something, but just thank you for listening. Sometimes that's all that someone needs. And so it disrupts the ways in which academic spaces are supposed to work. If we are only thinking of doing big things, then we can never really do the big things. They are the small things that we do every day that cumulatively actually begin to change the face of academia. And I would say that the pandemic has also, for good or for worse, has actually done something to how people think within academic spaces. The ways in which people were not compassionate before the pandemic, I have seen people that I never thought could be compassionate, being actually compassionate because of the 2 years of the pandemic. And I'm saying, if that is happening, then we'll embrace it and run with it. Because they don't know what directions we're going to take their quote-unquote compassion. So if we have that kind of opening, grab it and then transform it. Because sometimes they don't really know that they are offering it to you. But once it's offered, who are you to say no? But for the mental health thing, over the years, I have what I call my V friends. You know what they are? They are my vent friends. I have friends that when I've had it up to here, I don't want to talk to a dean, to another colleague. I call that person and I just say to her, when I call and I say to her, I just need to vent. That's what a V friend is. And she'll just say, go. And I'll just go. I'll unload everything. We don't even have to have a conversation. She just listens, and when I'm done, she'll be like, okay, we'll have a beer next week. I said, good, thank you. And you have no idea how much that does, honestly. And they will do, I have only 3 friends like that. No more, there are just 3 of them. When I call and I say the V word, they know they are ready to vent. And when they call me, they say the same thing. They'll just call, I answer, I say, Juliana, I say, I need, I say, go. They just go. And we might have a discussion about what they were venting about later on, but at that moment, they just knew that I would understand where they were coming from, what they were talking about. They don't need to explain a word, they don't need to tell me this or that. That's it. You just take it in and take it in. You just listen. And when they are done, they'll say, okay, see you tomorrow. I say, okay, bye. And that's it. I'm telling you, try it. You don't need 10 vent friends. No. No. I do not. They are not really your vent friends. Your vent friends are the people that you know that every sentence that comes out of your mouth, they understand what you're talking about. And even if they don't understand, they will not interrupt you. At that moment, all you need is their ear. You need some to relieve that pressure, this thing that is just killing you right now. It needs to get out. They will just listen, and you're done. Then you can have a conversation. No conversation, that's totally fine. And the thing with vent friends is that often, sometimes, you might have a conversation right there and then, if they so desire, or later on they might say, you remember that thing I was telling you about? I thought about it again and I thought, did I overreact? You know, because you keep doubting. Sometimes we doubt ourselves. Am I genuinely having this emotion? Am I supposed to have this emotion? So you let it out, and then later on you're coming like, okay, no, I was right to be mad about this. You know, I could have said this in a different way, but I said it this way. Have a vent friend, have a V friend. And V can mean something else too. Have a V friend. Just call, when you're that mad, you call them and you vent. We have our V's, so call them and you vent. That's it. And sometimes later on they might say, oh, you know that thing you talked to me about? I noticed that you could do this, and they say, oh, thank you. But at that moment, you did not need solutions. That's the interesting about a vent friend. You're not looking for a solution at that moment. There's pressure on your brain, there's pressure on your soul, there's pressure in your heart. You just need to get it out and decompress. And at that moment, that's all you need. And it can sustain you for another week or 2 weeks or 1 month before one of those moments comes up again. I only have 3 friends like that I call to vent. I only have 3.
Corinne. Okay, I so agree with you. And I do have, Mathe is one of the co-writer of this paper. She is one of a few of us. And when we get together, we can't go to public places because we scream and laugh and we're so loud. And it really is that space where you can be unfiltered and let it all out. It can be dangerous, because you feel seen, you feel resonated with, and then you move out of there and you sometimes forget that was a safe place. Be careful of, being that anywhere else. Anyway, I recommend that. And I do recommend as well that this Afems conference is a place where you can connect with people who you feel, you know what, let's follow this up. Let's get a WhatsApp group going, let's have something. It starts like that, and then it can become something more than that. And I know that, when you are struggling with that emptiness you feel of a post-PhD depression, and you doubt the story carries on in your head, it's very hard to reach out, in that stage. You just want to crawl into a hole somewhere, and I think I'm glad for this kind of space where we can find each other. Informal supervision is a thing, hey? And I do find myself going into that role. I think there is a privilege about that. I'm near the end of my career and I don't need to earn. I've just got my PhD, but the number of people I have informally supervised because they're not being heard by their supervisors, so they need a space, someone who will read their stuff with more kindness, and give them, a space to have the conversations that are missing, and so be the mentor you want for yourself, be the informal supervisor when someone is needing a critical friend on their PhD journeys. In terms of our safe space, it's not a free-for-all. You have to be recommended by someone in the group. You can't just, I'm a stranger, I heard about your group, can I join? So it is safe in that way. We haven't. There's a moment at one stage where someone said something very, a white woman, and she said something that it wasn't okay, and I called her on it and said, that's not so okay. But we've had disagreements at times as well, which are healthy too, and I think if you have someone wise, don't call myself wise, older maybe, holding it, it can just help, when something is a bit off, to pull it back and say, let's change the subject or whatever. So I think that's what I have. Thank you.
We have 1 minute remaining.
1
so
minute.
Very.
Can I just end to her point where she said, is there any way to manage your anger? Because I've been thinking about it and I was like, so this year I took over from a colleague. I was teaching in social psych, and I'm teaching on white privilege, and I'm teaching on colonialism and racism. And so I went. I was like, I don't have a job. I'm not permanent. So I went. Guys, I swear if you watch the videos, I went. And so afterwards, and my colleague tells me, she says, Simone, this work, so you're going to ruffle feathers. And she's like, just be prepared. So I was like, I told the white kids, I'm like, look, if you have an issue, look, there's the people, go send emails. I really don't care. I don't care. Please go for it. I'm telling you now, I don't care. And they were like, they all nodded, yeah, whatever. And then I get a nice, they get like these, the people, the representatives that talk on behalf, no, ones who talk on behalf of the class representatives. So she comes to me and she's like, oh, Simone, there's been a couple of white students that have said, oh, we love Simone, she's wonderful, but we feel like she's attacking us as white students. Oh, God. So I'm like, what you mean? I'm not attacking white people. Like, you have white privilege, guys, come, like, I don't understand, right? And in that moment with that girl, like, she told me some of the people, so I was like, what the hell? I talked to my colleague, I said, it happened, friend, they came for me. She was like, Simone, I know you're angry right now, I know you're a bit pissed off, but maybe just have an open conversation with the class. And I'm like, I don't have an open conversation when I'm angry, because I'm like, how the hell do you go? Why did you come to my face? Like, let's start there. Have a conversation with me. Say, actually, Simone, when you spoke about white privilege, I think that you were attacking us because X, Y, and Z. Now you go behind my back, you go cry to another white girl. Are you mad? Come to my face. So I was very, and they were I didn't even know how to start to have that talk. Also, I'm the lecturer. Also, this is me, like, my course convener was a white woman, and she was already like sending me interesting stuff at the time. Use it here as interesting people. So I was also like, so now on camera, I'm like, oh, so somebody, okay. And I forgot that I've been recorded. Ooh, and I'm saying some controversial stuff on camera. And I remembered, I was like, actually, no, why must I always tone down my anger? Like, why would you say stuff like that? Like, why would you provoke me? The one girl was saying we were watching things about shack dwellers. And there were a group of white kids who were sleeping because they said I'm boring them with my content. These are people's lived experience, and you bored, and you want me to not be angry. I must be toned down because what? You scared of to be an angry black woman. I was like, I'm so tired of being toned down. So I tell white people, if you are not serious about transformation, if you're not serious about doing something, then get out of my class. If what I tell you scares you, or you telling me I'm provoking you, get out of my class. If you want to go to my white, go to them. It's fine, because you know what? I don't even have a job for you. Because at this point I was so fed up. I was just like, you know what? So why must we manage? Why must we always, like the prof said, why must we always seek approval in academic? Because I swear, if a white person had said this stuff, I said, nothing would have happened to them. But because I'm black now, I must tiptoe around serious things. And then you have the audacity to disrespect me and disrespect my black students. Like, no. So I don't even know. Why must we always manage? Why must we always seek approval in these spaces? Because it's not allowing us to be us. Sorry.
If you're not careful, I want to be.
We have to wrap up because
I just want to say this: be careful what you say. What works for A may not work for B.
Yeah, no, exactly.
They'll pick your words, and you get stigmatized, and you may not get a job, and you will not find it funny. But please quote me. You get stigmatized. I have faced stigmatization, and this is our space. Be very careful what you say. One way you can manage your anger is to count 1 to 3 to 100. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you so much.
Next session is starting at 12 o'clock, but if you have time, you can go down.
And they keep doing it.